Hello and welcome to another edition of Professor Speaks. My name is Alex Hernandez. Alongside me is Dr. Craig Stern. And we're going to talk about big data analytics. It's one of the major functions that is provided by Pharma and Pro Data Analytics, but we want to talk about it in a more macro perspective. Meaning, take it back a little bit. Big data started off in the healthcare field from genomic testing, and now it's moved on to more visualization type programs like R statistics and various others. And one of the common misconceptions of big data analytics is that it's heavily related on statistics itself, like the statistics you would look at and study in school. But one of our interns that we have here um, told me she was surprised about how little it has to do with finding the p values or just summing up certain parts. It's more visualization of the data. And here to help me talk about that is Dr. Craig Stern. And we want to talk about why does big data analytics matter?
Yeah, when you guys brought this to me, I thought it was an important topic, and we do that a lot. But I do want to talk about it, you're right, in a more global perspective. So let's try and deal with it from the standpoint of analytics matters because now we have access to data from medical encounters. Every time someone goes to the hospital, someone goes to a doctor, someone goes to a clinic or the emergency room. We have all the pharmacy claims when you go to a pharmacy, and everything that is done when you fill a prescription, laboratory values, enrollment information, things like that, and even workers' comp information. And so it matters because you have to know a couple of fundamental questions. One is financially, what's going on? What's the current situation? And then given that, what's driving that current situation? And given that, what the drivers are, what can you do about it? How are you going to change it?
Right.
And given that, once you've changed it or while you're changing it, you note, by the way, that big changes frequently don't occur. What you have to do is change a few things and a few more things, etc., in order to make things work, kind of like the financial economy. And so what you see is that financially, you need to understand the data, understand what to do with it, how to change it in order to make an impact. On a clinical standpoint, you need to know what's going on so that you can grab it, identify where are the problems, who are the patients that have problems, and even predict who are the patients that you expect to have problems. Kind of like a common problem in health plans today, where they say, well, how do you predict who are the people that are going to be opiate addicted or opiate abusing? How do you predict that? How do you deal with that? And then how do you change those individuals or try and interact with them so that you can modify that situation and then monitor it on a long-term basis? These are things that makes big data analytics a very important issue, and the number of problems, the number of issues is enormous because everyone that looks at it has a different question and a different idea.
Right, and one of the major things that we also provide is we look for adverse drug interactions, and I feel that's a very important use of data. When you're monitoring pharmacy claims, you'll see a patient is getting prescribed one dose of this and another dose of this, and you're seeing the interaction between the two, and there's usually what is it, FDA drug regulations. What other resources do we use?
Well, we have all kinds of issues with regard to the CDC, the chronic disease control, right. The FDA, issues with regard to some of the master databases. Frankly, it's bigger than what anyone uses. The fundamental issues that people look at are things such as compliance with drugs, duplicate therapy, polypharmacy, which means that people are on a lot of drugs, and it's been well established that people that have more and more drugs have more and more drug interactions or drug-induced disease, drug interactions as you're talking about, Alex,
right.
And others. So there's fundamental things that people look at, and at the time at point of sale, they look at them and they address it. But once you look at it in a broad perspective and look backwards, you begin to see problems that need interaction from physicians, pharmacists, and others in order to try and correct those problems.
Right, right. So how is it being used on a more macro perspective? I mean, without getting into the minutia of all the reports that could be made from these data analytics, how is it actually being used? It's something for like the common person. How can they see it?
Yeah, where we are today is in a very interesting position, and that is we used to be in the position of analysis only being done by analysts. And even to a great degree in many plans and otherwise, there's analytics being done just by analysts. And we certainly do that. So with all full disclosure, we deal with the more complicated problems and the most complicated problems to deal with. But having said that, the world has changed so that issues with regard to a host of different tools that are out there, whether they're Excel, whether it's Excel pivot tables, power pivot tables,
Right.
issues with regard to, as you were talking about, more graphical things that have programs like Tableau, and issues with regard to R statistics, and issues with regard to general kind of simple statistics showing bar graphs and line graphs and pie charts and things like that.
Right.
But the real issue is not unlike what happened with spreadsheets, is that it's now moving away from analytics to more things that people can do at their desktop, on their mobile devices, on their phone, etc., to deal with it. It doesn't mean the analytics is not still going to have to be dealt with complicated problems and the statistics that you're talking about.
Right.
But it does mean that a lot of the questions that people get, like just for example, how many patients are diabetic? How many of them are on insulin? How many of them are under control with A1Cs less than 7 and were in the hospital or the emergency room over the last 30 days? These are simple questions that could easily be done. They're being done today on pivot tables and on graphs, etc.,
Right.
so that people can make decisions about it. Yes, we do it, but this isn't a sales thing. This is an issue where we're moving to the direction where really complicated analysis is done by analysts and common stuff is being done on the desktop or the mobile device. That's a huge change, and it is making everybody into an analyst.
Right. And I think more importantly than just it being on a spreadsheet or being on a pivot table, it's becoming easier to read and easier to make for yourself at home.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
But
yes.
Among those things, among just being able to read them, being able to bring in the data, process it, and being able to read it easily, what are the type of things that you have to be careful of?
Yeah, that's a really important question, Alex. It is easy to take data and throw it up on a graph and say, oh, things are going up, they're going down, or there's some sort of association between things. And people see a lot of associations. They may not be causation, but they may be association. And the association may be interesting, but it may have nothing whatsoever to do with truly healthcare, what's going on. What we see here is that people tend to forget some of the basic issues about data. Namely, when you get data, you need to scrub data. You need to clean it. You need to get rid of all of the data that is garbage. Maybe a lot, maybe a little. It depends on what the sources are, but you need to address that.
And just so you guys know that there are many different ways to define certain parts of data as garbage, meaning claims that may have been inputted wrong, maybe a claim that wasn't actually paid, those type of things.
Sure, absolutely. And then you need to make sure that it was mapped right, so that whatever was in the original data is mapped to what it is that you're supposed to be analyzing. Frequently, there's mapping problems. Furthermore, there may be issues in the data where they have added characters or things so that what you expect to see isn't there because there's been carriage returns or all kinds of different problems that were added so that that data isn't easy to analyze.
Right.
And there's a bunch of these problems, but in addition to that is the issue that when you have data, you want to make sure that that data means something. So it's not just a matter of, well, we have the data and we can use it, and the association, but that data has some meaning and that there's some data that you can map from one to one. Just to be simplistic about it, the enrollment file has a number for an individual. That number has to be reflected in the pharmacy file, has to be reflected in the medical file, has to be reflected in the laboratory value file, and you're tracking all of that. You're trying to track the person through it. Sometimes, some months they may have nothing. Other times they may have everything, or they may have nothing in medical. They have something in pharmacy or lab or whatever.
Right.
In what goes on. You need to be able to track all of that. And so just as a caution, just because you have data doesn't mean that the data is correct. You need to do all kinds of validation to make sure that that data is correct. Once it's done, then you can use it on your mobile device. You can use it on the desktop or otherwise.
Well, great technology we have now. You're able to take something that was usually only found in desktops and usually only provided by a certain provider, and you could only get it from that person. Now you can look at your desktop, even your iPad or smartphone, iPhone, Android, whatever, you can look at it anywhere. And that's the topic we wanted to cover today, big data analytics. If you had any more questions, you could feel free to message us. You can subscribe to future episodes of Professor Speaks. And also be sure to like and share with your friends. Free information is always available at propharmaconsultants.com/rxinfox. And we will see you next week.